My dad humiliated me in front of everyone, so I left without a word. A month later, my brother asked why I stopped sending money. I told him, didn't want to waste it on someone who already had everything. Then they finally learned what losing me meant. Hey, I'm Eli, 28 years old, and basically the other sibling in my family. You know, not the golden child or the favorite, just kind of there. My younger brother, Mason, he's the superstar. He's the soccer champ, straight A guy, our parents' little trophy. Meanwhile, I've been the one fixing his car whenever he crashes it or paying off his parking tickets so he wouldn't get grounded. I'd make excuses for him missing holidays just to keep things chill. They call it being a good big brother, but I felt more like an invisible wallet. Living away was easier, so after college, I moved to Chicago, snagged a job in IT, and built a pretty decent life. I had my own studio apartment, a stable income, and kept it low-key. But every time I went back home, mostly for family events, I felt like a guest in my own family. Conversations always revolved around Mason, his job, his new girlfriend, or that charity run he did. Even when I mentioned my promotion to senior analyst, it got barely any reaction. Mom just smiled politely, already moving on to Mason's upcoming business trip to Dubai, and Dad would mutter something about tech jobs not being real work before switching the TV to the football game. Still, I kept showing up, hoping one day they might actually see me or appreciate my efforts. I was the one bringing gifts every Christmas, helping pay off their mortgage during COVID, and even transferring Mason some cash here and there with just a generic thanks text in return. My parents never asked where my money came from, they assumed I was fine. Mom would say, "You don't have a family yet, so you can afford to help your brother." Then came Dad's 60th birthday, a simple backyard barbecue with family and neighbors. I flew in, helped set up, and even covered the cake when Mom misjudged the size needed. Mason waltzes in late as usual, with a flashy new watch and his girlfriend Tessa, who ironically runs a minimalist YouTube channel while wearing $400 sandals. Dad lights up, gives him a huge hug, and I'm just over here with a nod, like I was just another guest. During dinner, while folks gathered around, someone, probably cousin Jake after a few too many drinks, asked what I was up to. I mentioned a cool new security system I'd worked on for a logistics firm. The convo didn't last long before Mason jumped in with his latest big deal. Dad was all proud, saying now that's making a real difference. I laughed, but really it was that bitter kind of laugh when you know you'll never measure up. I joked, guess all I'm good for is paying the bills, huh? And Dad, drink in hand, says loud enough for everyone to hear, "You've always been a drain, Eli. Your brother's the one who matters." No dramatic gasps or anything. A few awkward laughs. Mom tried to hush him, but it was too late. My stomach dropped, not because I was shocked, but because he finally said it out loud. I didn't yell or storm off, I just nodded, went inside, grabbed my stuff, booked an early flight back to Chicago, and left without a word. The days after were strangely peaceful, no pretentious texts or calls. I focused on myself, canceled the auto transfers to Mason, cut off the family phone plan, and logged out of the shared Netflix. 3 weeks passed, and one night Mason texts me, annoyed, asking why I stopped sending money. I stared at the message for a bit before replying, didn't want to waste it on someone who already has everything that matters. And that was it. After I made a quick decision and turned away from it all, things got really interesting. A few days later, my mom started calling. I didn't pick up, and then came a barrage of texts, first worried, then trying to make me feel guilty, then angry. "You're being immature. We're family. Mason needs you right now." I ignored all of them. It wasn't out of spite, I was just done. But I didn't expect things to go downhill so quickly without me. It started with tiny hints that the framework I'd secretly been holding together for years was collapsing now that I wasn't there to support it. The first call came from my Aunt Linda. She usually stayed out of it, offering passive shrugs and polite nods, but this time she was more involved. After ignoring her first call, she rang again and left a voicemail. "Eli," she said, "your mom's in tears. She says Mason's behind on rent and your parents are dipping into their savings to help. What's going on?" I just sat there, staring at the wall, thinking about the truth I'd kept to myself for so long. Finally, I said, "I stopped helping. And let's be real, it was never really Mason's money." Linda was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "You know how they are. They don't think about the consequences until they're knee-deep in them." "Maybe that's how they'll finally learn," I replied, and hung up. Things either got worse or better, depending on how you see it. Without the $500 I used to send Mason every 2 weeks, he couldn't pay rent for 2 months. He started drowning in credit card debt. Tessa, who thought hard work was editing her own thumbnails, dumped him as soon as his Venmo started bouncing. She even made a dramatic breakup video titled "Leaving a Toxic Relationship, My Truth," which got more views than anything else she'd done. Talk about irony. Then things got real. My parents' finances were falling apart. When I was younger, Dad used to brag about how real men manage money without complaining. What he didn't mention was my silent support, like the $800 I gave them every Christmas for house repairs or the loan I covered when he defaulted on a failed business venture 5 years ago. Mom would always say, "He doesn't need the shame." But now, without me bailing them out, their problems were out in the open. Their internet got cut off, Mom's book club had to go on hiatus because they couldn't host anymore, Dad's truck was repossessed, and no one admitted until it was too late that he'd used Mason's name to open credit lines. What hurt the most? No one asked me for help directly. They went to Linda, my cousin Jake, even an old high school buddy who lived nearby, hoping someone could get through to me. One person even tried guilting me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, of all places. The last straw was an email from Mom. Subject: "Come home." It was short and felt like it was ripped from a manual on how to manipulate without apologizing. "Your father isn't well. Mason's doing his best. I know you're angry, but this family needs you. We've always needed you. Please think about what really matters." I read it 5 times, started writing a reply, and deleted it. What could I say? That I'd spent 28 years putting them first, and it was never about me? That I spent birthdays hearing Dad brag about Mason while I did the dishes, or that they mailed me a card for college graduation while they rented a boat for Mason's high school diploma? I let silence speak for me, and for the first time, they felt what it was like to miss the person they took for granted every single day. Silence became my voice. Linda texted again. "You need to see this," she wrote, with a screenshot of a Facebook post from my mom. It was a photo of her and Dad sitting on a porch that wasn't even theirs, probably someone else's house for show, with the caption, "Family isn't about money, it's about love." Some people forget that when they walk away. The comments were filled with sympathy from people who only knew half the story, sending heart emojis and praising how strong my parents were. I didn't comment or like it. I just stared at it, feeling something I couldn't name, not anger, not sadness, just a cold clarity. This wasn't new. It was just the first time I didn't cover it up. And what happened next? Well, nobody saw that coming. 2 weeks after that Facebook post, I got a letter, not an email. So there I was, holding this actual letter, not just a text or email, addressed to me in that fancy, tight cursive my mom used when she wanted to look all proper. It had been sent to my old college address and then forwarded to me. I opened it slowly, bracing myself for another guilt trip or passive-aggressive hint begging for forgiveness. But what I found was stranger, a handwritten note about a page long, complete with tear stains and a coffee ring, showing my mom had spilled something while figuring out what to say. It wasn't an apology, which didn't surprise me, but it was something else. "Eli," it started, "I know you probably won't read this. And if you do, you'll think I'm just making excuses. Maybe I am, maybe I deserve the silence. But I need you to know something, your dad's not doing well. He won't admit it, but the doctor said it's his heart, and he's scared. That's why he's been lashing out more, why he said those things. Mason's struggling too, he's not as tough as he seems. You were the one we always relied on, not because we didn't love you, but because you could handle it. Maybe that wasn't fair. Maybe we leaned on you too much. But Eli, families mess up, and right now, we're falling apart. We need you. Please come home." Reading it should have stirred up old guilt in me, but instead, I just felt exhausted, not the kind of tired you can sleep off, but the kind that sinks into your bones from carrying too much for too long. But even then, I couldn't help but wonder if it was all true about my dad, about Mason, about everything they kept hidden behind what they expected of me. So, I did something I hadn't done in forever, I started digging. Didn't call or ask them directly, I just researched. Mason's LinkedIn still listed him as a freelance consultant, but he hadn't posted in 6 months. His old company quietly removed him from their team page, and public records showed he'd been evicted twice. Then, I looked up my parents' house, and it was in pre-foreclosure. Suddenly, it all clicked, the letter, the random calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. They weren't reaching out because they missed me, they were reaching out because the bank finally stopped waiting. But here's the kicker, they didn't know what I'd done. A week after leaving that awkward family barbecue, while they were still passing around the potato salad and hyping Mason's latest gig, I started checking out property listings, particularly in their neighborhood. And I bought a house 2 doors down from theirs. Not to live in, not to rent out, just to have. It was a fixer-upper, needed a new roof and some foundation work. I paid cash, set up renovations under a holding company that couldn't be traced back to me. Changed the mailbox, parked an old junker in the driveway to make it look abandoned. They never noticed, but they would soon. Everything came to a head on a rainy Wednesday. I was working from home when I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, my mom called. I picked up. Her voice was shaky and desperate. "Eli," she said, "someone bought the house next door. It's you, isn't it?" I stayed silent, just let her keep talking. "I saw your name on the permit," she said, voice cracking. "You've been here this whole time, watching us." Still, I said nothing. She didn't understand. "Why would you?" Finally, I spoke, calm and steady like I'd practiced. "Because I wanted to see what happened when the drain stopped carrying the weight." She started to cry, not dramatically, just quiet, broken sounds. "Eli, we're losing everything." "You already lost me," I said, and then I hung up. But it didn't end there. The fallout came fast. Mason, who hadn't held a steady job in over a year, tried to twist the story online. He posted, then deleted, a tweet saying I was cutting the family off out of spite, calling me toxic and abusive. But I had proof, not receipts, literally, but stories people remembered. The cousin whose college books I paid for, the uncle whose hospital bill I covered, the niece I sent a laptop to during lockdown. They reached out quietly. "We didn't know," they said. "We're sorry." I didn't need a crowd on my side, I just needed them to finally see the truth. And now, as the foreclosure signs go up and the family group chat goes dead silent, I sit on the porch of that little renovated house down the street. I sip coffee, watching them scramble, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Because sometimes, the only way to teach people what you're worth is to hold up a mirror. So, the plan was to let them feel what it was like without me around. And just when I thought things had finally settled, and they maybe got the picture, I got this envelope. But surprise, it wasn't from my mom, it was from Mason. Inside was a check, signed, and a short note that just said, "You win." It hit me then that he still didn't get it. This wasn't about winning. I looked at that check for ages. It wasn't much, barely enough to cover a month's rent for a halfway decent apartment in the city. But the message? It was loud and clear, "You win," like this whole thing was some sort of competition. Like finally being noticed, finally being valued, finally choosing me was a game I needed to win. That's when I realized none of them understood. I wasn't proving a point by walking away. I wasn't out for revenge or even trying to hurt anyone, though I won't lie, knowing they felt some pain did feel like justice sometimes. I just had enough. Enough of being their emotional ATM, their unpaid problem solver, the guy they only thought of when something needed fixing or paying. Even when things were falling apart, they couldn't shake the idea that I was somehow the issue for letting go. I didn't tear up the check, though. Didn't frame it either. I just tucked it away in the back of a drawer, like a relic from a past life. And then, I did something they'd never see coming. I moved on. I sold the house next to theirs, didn't even bother visiting during the sale. A local investor bought it, and last I heard, he was tearing it down to build something new. A fresh start seemed about right. I didn't want to watch them fall apart, didn't want to keep score from a distance. I wanted to build a life where I mattered, not because I was useful or reliable, but just because I existed. So I started saying yes to things I kept putting off. Booked a solo trip to Iceland, just me and a camera, with zero plans. I signed up for cooking classes because I was over microwave meals and eating alone. Even joined a local hiking group, which I used to think was a waste of a Saturday morning. Turns out, strangers can become better than family, and some of them did. A few months in, I met Danny. She was straightforward and smart, always calling people out for selling themselves short. She noticed I always introduced myself by my job first. "You're not your job," she said once over coffee. "Unless you want to be, but that's a pretty small box to live in." We took things slow, coffee, walks, late night calls that turned into quiet mornings. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to be loved. I didn't have to bankroll someone else's dreams just to get a seat at their table. With Danny, I just was. Nearly a year after cutting ties with my family, I got this call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my dad, sounding scratchy voiced and smaller than I remembered. "Eli, I don't know if this number still works, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I miss you. Your mom does too. Mason, well, he's figuring things out. But I was wrong, son. I was wrong for a long time, and I know saying that now might not matter, but if you ever want to talk, I'll be here." I didn't cry, I didn't even smile. I just sat there, holding the phone, listening to a man who spent his life valuing love by usefulness, finally realizing the high price of his pride was silence. I didn't call back then. I waited a week, then two. Then one Sunday, while Danny and I were folding laundry in our new place, our place, I said, I think I might write him. She looked up, because you want closure? No, I said, because I'm ready. The letter I wrote wasn't harsh, wasn't chilly, wasn't dramatic. Just real. Dad, I got your voicemail. I've spent a long time trying to understand why things were the way they were. I'm not writing to make you feel guilty, I just want you to know I needed to leave. I needed space to figure out who I was outside of who you all expected me to be. I'm not the drain. I never was. I'm not coming back to fix things, but I'm willing to talk on my terms if you can accept that. Here's my number. I sent it and didn't hover by the phone. I didn't hold my breath or leave room for false hope. I'd built something solid, something separate. I didn't need their apology to move forward, but if they offered it, I'd hear it out. Weeks went by, and then one evening, I got a random text from a number I didn't recognize, and it just said, "Thanks, I don't really deserve this chance, but I'll take it." Turns out it was from my dad. We ended up grabbing lunch a few days later, just him and me. No big declarations or dramatic turns of events, just two people, each with their own baggage, trying to have a conversation. He asked about work, my life, and about Danny, even saying her name like it actually mattered to him, not just as some fill-in for what he thought my life should be. Then he just laid it out there, I really messed up. I nodded, yeah, you did. He didn't even flinch, just nodded back and said, I'm trying to be better, even if it's too late. I told him, it's not too late, just a different path now. For me, healing wasn't about a neat little forgiveness package or going back to the old ways. It's about building something new, smaller, slower, but stronger. As for Mason, we were out of touch for a bit. Heard through the grapevine that he got himself a solid job, nothing flashy, just good, honest work. After a while, he reached out, not asking for anything, just a simple message. He admitted he hadn't realized what he was asking for me all those years, saying he was sorry. I didn't reply right away, but when I did, I just said, I believe you. Let's take it one step at a time. And that's what we did. That was 2 years back. Now my life isn't some dramatic saga or a perfect comeback story, it's just my life. I work, come home, cook with Danny, read, laugh, relax, send birthday cards to my folks. Sometimes we chat, sometimes we don't. Mason and I grab a drink every month, no handouts or awkwardness, just being brothers the way we can now. The thing is, people don't always get the ending they dream of, but if they fight for it, walk away from the noise when it gets too loud, and choose peace over feeling like they have to, they get the ending they need. And I did because I wasn't the problem, I was what kept things standing. Now, finally, I'm the reason my own life stands tall. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more crazy real life stories happening around you.